What's going on, everybody? It's your guy Realistic here, and I'm doing another tutorial for SoundOracle.net. And in this video, I'm going to be going over 3 different things that you can do to improve your mastering instantly, and they're pretty easy to do, and these tips and tricks are going to work in any DAW. So just because I'm using Pro Tools doesn't mean that it won't work for you. So the tools that we are going to need today is we are going to need some type of bus compressor, and we are going to need an EQ that has the ability to do mid-side and linear phase. For some of you, that may have to be 2 different EQs. And then we will have to have some type of ability to read a Loudness meter, and for some of us that's going to be built right into our limiter, and for other people we may need to be using a separate plugin, and I'll talk about some different plugins that will get us for that. All right, and then as you know, with my tutorials I like to show everybody what to do if you just want to get in and get out, and then after that what I'm going to do is I'll break down individually. So the tips that I have for everybody is, the first one here is when we compress, we don't want to squash it, so we're going to want to slow attack, and we're going to want to have it to where our gain reduction is only between about maybe -2 dB, not really any more than that. And then the other thing that we're going to want to do is we're going to want to EQ the sides and the mids differently. That way we can control the stereo field and everything that's coming down the center differently, and it gives us a little bit more control. And then we also want to be able to engage that to be linear phase as well, just so we're going to be a little bit more true to the transients and we're not smearing all the frequencies as we're mastering. And then the other thing is we're just going to want to hit this Loudness meters to be within the standard, and the standard right now as far as what we've been hearing on streaming service is -9 to about -8, somewhere around there. So those are what we're going to be going through, and for everybody else that wants to know how all of this stuff works, let's go ahead and dive in. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is not squashing your master with the compressor. And so we want to have a slow attack time. I usually go between 10 milliseconds. 30 might be a little too slow because I can't get it to react. But the problem is when we have it too fast, like over here, what starts to happen is we start to smash down on the transients too fast. And when you're mixing, on individual channels, maybe a fast attack time is fine, if you're doing vocals or a bass line or something like that. But when we're doing things like sums or mastering, we want to have a slower attack time because we don't want to have it punch right down on those drums, and then we lose that excitement and that initial transient, and that's what makes drums smack. So we'll lose that. And then the other thing is we want to make sure while we're mastering that we're only having about 2 dB of gain reduction, maybe 3 at the most, but even that might be pushing it, and just because we don't want to squash it or pump it. So let's go ahead and we'll give that some listen here. This is a song right here that I mastered for an artist, and I chose this one because some of these are sounds that you can find on SoundOracle.net. The loop and the drums are actually from the J Black kit, so it's pretty dope.
With the summer die, it's deeper than you think. I'm cruising with a fade, my homie be the case, just got a new place.
Okay, so you can see right here, when we're looking at this meter, I'm only having about -2 dB of gain reduction, and that's the goal. So let me show you if we do a faster attack time and we increase the gain reduction. I'll show you what the problem is with that.
Got work in the calling love. More shots 'cause you only.
So you can see right there we lost the life, a lot of the punch went away, and it's starting to pump. So what I'll do is I'll put this back in, and then I'll slowly ease back to where we were.
Got work in the calling love. More shots 'cause you only live once. Girl, you pop, then you wanna get pumped. Tell a lift, I'll be walking out front. Life got lit, TBH.
So it just sounds a lot more natural, and it's doing actually what it needs to do. It's giving us that glued feeling without taking the life away. And then what I'll do is I'll just bypass with this, so you can hear what it sounds like with this type of compression and without. So then you can understand why we're even compressing it in the first place.
Hands in a rub 'cause they wanna get them on. Ha. Got work in the calling love. More shots 'cause you only live once. Girl, you pop, then you wanna get pumped.
So you can hear right there, one of the things that it did was it made it perceived to be louder, and some of that is because we are actually making it louder with the makeup gain. But the other thing that was going on there was things just kind of glued together a little bit, and everything sounded a little bit more cohesive, and we just had a little bit more of a solid mix. All right, so the next thing that I want to go over here is I want to talk about our mid-side EQ and linear phase EQ. So these are things that can make your mastering better. Instead of just EQing, we want to be able to EQ in different ways. And so with mid-side EQ, it allows us to EQ the sides, like the left and right channels combine differently than we do everything that's coming down the center. Now, if you want to know like a full in-depth on mid-side EQ, we actually do have a full video on mid-side EQ. So if you're watching on YouTube, you can just click right up here and that will take you to that video. If you're on IGTV watching this, all you got to do is go to our YouTube channel and search for mid-side EQ and that video will pop right up. So let me go ahead and show you some reasons why we might want to EQ the sides and the mids differently. So when we think about, what would be coming down the mids and what would be coming down the sides. So there may be situations when you're mastering where maybe the reverb is just a little too much or it's causing some muddiness. Well, if you're mastering and you don't have much control, what you could do is you could EQ the sides of the mid-range a little bit, and that will allow you to control some of that reverb. So let me go ahead and play this, and what I'll do is I'll solo out that frequency.
At the club, hence spoke, and the fans interrupt.
So right there, you can hear that we were able to find some of that problem area that the reverb was causing, and I'm just EQing the sides, so I'm just getting that kind of that washy reverb that's causing some issues right there. And I'm only EQing, less than 1 dB, so it really doesn't have to be too much. All right, and then another area that you might want to look at is think about what's coming down the mids that's really usually aggressive, and it's usually the kick and the bass, right? And those are things that we normally we center. We don't pan those things left and right typically. So that might be an area when you're mastering that you may want to EQ that area, whether it's up or down. And so I usually want to start with cutting if we can, just to kind of clean some things up. And again, we can solo some frequencies. So let's go ahead and listen to what we're looking for here. I'll go to a different section here where I know we got a little bit more bass and more of a kick drum that's not filtered.
Grind in the back.
So that's an area that's got just a little bit more of a aggressive overtone and a little bit more of a resonating bump to it that we may want to get rid of. And there might be areas too where we want to clean up some in the 200 range as well.
Find a way that I could summarize. I know you got.
And then another thing too is if you're like, oh, I want the kick drum to have a little bit more action. Well, you may not want to EQ the entire stereo field. You may want to just EQ the center there, because typically that's where the kick drum is. Well, same thing. You can find where you think that kick drum fundamental frequency would be. Usually with kick drums, it's between 80 to 95, somewhere around there. Sometimes a little lower, sometimes a little higher.
Grind in the bad little hoes wanna organize. Trying to find a way that I could summarize. I know you gotta deal with the other side. When the sun cools down and the summer dies. Look, even when it's dark and your color.
So we're able to just EQ what's coming down the center. And then, same thing is, might want to sweeten up the sides a little bit just to add a little bit more energy. And what we could do is we could sweeten up the sides a little bit without having to affect the entire mix here.
Hoes wanna organize. Trying to find a way that I could summarize. I know you gotta deal with the other side. When the sun cools down and the summer dies. Look, even when it's dark and your color.
And it's just a way to also make it be perceived to be wider, because what we're doing is we're affecting the sides differently than we would be with the mids. So those are some different types of MidSide EQs. I will have some different MidSide EQ brands that you can buy populating up on the screen here. So now let's dive into linear phase EQ. There's really not too much to talk about. I just want to let you know what it is and why you want to use it for mastering. So what linear phase is going to do is it's going to eliminate the phase shifting that happens when you EQ things. Normally, when you're under zero latency or minimum phase, you'll have it where it kind of shifts the frequencies a little bit, and it'll also cause smearing and stuff like that. Now, when you're mixing, it's really not too much of a issue when you're on individual channels, and it can't really be heard that well. Plus, you don't want to be slapping on a bunch of linear phase EQs in your mix, because what's going to happen is you're going to get a lot of latency, and then you're also going to get some artifacts and pre-ringing that's going on. But when you're mastering, that's the time that you want to use linear phase EQ, because now what we're doing is when we EQ, we might shift the entire track, shift the phase of the entire track. So when we go ahead and do linear phase, we no longer have that. So what I really like about the FabFilter Pro Q3 here is it gives me the ability to do MidSide EQ and linear phase EQ right in there. Sometimes you may have to have different EQs if you don't have this one. So I'll have a list of different EQs that have linear phase option on it populating on the screen right now. All right, so my last tip here is we want to follow the Loudness Meter. And what that's going to do is that's going to help us get to the loudness that we really are looking for as far as what's out there for industry standards. So a few years back, the streaming services decided to adapt the Loudness meters for how they figure out what their loudness standards are. So that's what we've been using in music for a while. So usually mastering, you're not going to focus too much on dB or RMS when you're dealing with the actual output of what your limiter is here. And so the standard right now is -9, -8 LUFS. If you do research, you're going to get a lot of stuff that tells you -14 LUFS. And by the way, when we're talking LUFS, keep in mind negative, so the lower numbers are actually higher. So -9 LUFS is actually louder than -14 LUFS. So a lot of the research will show, oh, well, if you're streaming, you want to submit it at -14 LUFS. Don't do that. That is going to be way too quiet. I've fallen for that a few times myself, because I was like, oh, cool, that's the industry standard. I'm going to do that. My songs weren't competing with anything else that was going on streaming services. And so what I did was I bought a couple tracks on iTunes. I bought Panini by Lil Nas X, and I bought Highest in the Room by Travis Scott, just to kind of see what things were out there for loudness. And I ran them through my Loudness Meter to see what it was, and they were coming in like pretty loud. They were like -9. Panini was at like -8, which is just like really, really loud. And so if you want to hit the standard of what's going out there, you want to shoot for -9. If you want to push it, maybe -8.5, -8. You don't really want to go louder than that, though, because when you start going louder than that, that's when you start to get that distortion and crackling. So that's what you want to shoot for. And another thing, too, if you're trying to get a little bit more headroom, something that you may want to do is you want to maybe go back and lower the kick and bass a little bit, because those eat up a lot of headroom. So if you're having issues of getting things to sound louder and you're still dealing with a lot of clipping and crackling, that can be a tip that can help you a lot, is just kind of lower the kick and bass. It'll give you a little bit more headroom. And then you'll be surprised when mastering of how the kick and bass will reappear after you start increasing the overall gain. But let's go ahead and check that out just so you can see what I'm talking about.
Trying to find a way that I could summarize. I know you gotta deal with the other side. When the sun cools down and the summer dies. Look, even when it's dark.
So you can see right there, we're clocking in at about -9 right there. And that's going to kind of give you more of that standard loudness that we're looking for. So yeah, those right there, those are my tips to improve your mastering. I mean, there's so many other things that you could do for mastering, but those are just 3 quick tips to help you out real quick. If you do want to know more tips on mastering. We do have some videos on mastering, so you can go ahead and just click on those and watch those. We'll have those coming up at the end of the video for you to click on. Also, just let me know in the comment sections if there's anything about mastering that you want to do, and I can do a video about that. So I'm hoping that you got a lot out of this tutorial today. Hopefully there's some information that was useful. If you're getting a lot out of this but you want to see more, please feel free to comment below. Let us know what kind of tutorials that you want to see in the future, and Oracle and I can definitely make that happen. We're always trying to find the content that you want to see. If you're liking what you're hearing from me, you can find me everywhere on social media at Realistic Productions. You can find me at the web, realisticproductions.net. You can find my man SoundOracle everywhere at SoundOracle. And if you're looking for the best 808s, the best kicks, the best snares with the craziest loops and samples you can find on the internet right now, go to SoundOracle.net. All right, till next time.